Alright, let's jump into Chapter 3. The Store. Roy Grimmett, who ran the grocery store in Lost River, was a big friendly guy and everybody liked him. He was also one of the few people who had actually been born and raised in the area, except for the Creoles across the river, whose families had been there since the 1700s. Roy had inherited the store from his uncle, who had run it for 50 years. The tin Coca-Cola signs, okay, this is probably like the 50s, 60s, or something. God, I wish I knew what year it was. Okay. The tin Coca-Cola sign from across the front of the brick building advertised it simply as Grimmett's Grocery. Sounds like Greer's, to be honest. But it was much more than that. It was a landmark. If the store had not been on the corner, most people would have driven right by, never knowing there was a river or an entire community of people living there. For the 60 or 70 residents, dang, it was the place where they did their shopping and kept up on all the news, good and bad. It was an especially favorite. My nose is dripping, sorry. It was an especially favorite stopping off spot for many fishermen in the area, and the place where they bought their tackle and live bait, and swapped lies about how many fish they had caught, all except Claude Underwood, the best fisherman there, who never said how many he had caught or where he had caught them. There were 2 gas pumps outside the store. Inside was rather plain, with wooden floors and a meat counter in the back. The only concession to decoration was the large array of mounted fish, game birds, and deer heads that lined the walls, and a stuffed red fox on top of the shelf in the back. That actually sounds exactly like Greer's. Because that's exactly what they have in there. Okay. One of the Creoles, Julian Lepon, was the only taxidermist in the area. Had once been a good friend and poker pal of Roy's uncle. Most of the produce was local. Roy bought his meat from the area hunters and always had plenty of fresh shrimp, crab, and oysters from the Gulf, and fish from the river. He got his milk, poultry, eggs, fruit, and vegetables from nearby farms. Because his was the only store around, he stocked much more than just food and gas. He sold everything from work gloves, rakes, shovels, pickaxes, to rubber boots. Kids loved the store because of its great selection of candy, potato chips, and ice cream, and the deep box of ice-cold drinks kept by the front door filled with every kind you could want. Orange Crush, root beer, Grapettes, never heard of that, Dr. Pepper, and RC Cola. Name it, he had it. But Roy also had something that no other store in the world could offer. It had been just a few weeks after Christmas, about 5 years ago, when Roy heard the popping of guns in the back of the store. A pair of kids that lived in the backwoods had gotten high-powered pump action BB guns that year and were busy shooting everything in sight, just like some redneck boys. Roy was a hunter and a fisherman, but those damn mean little redneck boys. He even says it. But those damn mean little redneck boys would shoot anything and leave it to die. He hated that, and he walked out the back of the door and yelled at them, "Hey, you boys, knock it off!" And they immediately scattered back into the woods, but they had just shot something, and whatever it was still alive. Oh, I forgot that this is what happened. See, this is what's nice. I forgot so much about this book. It's been probably a good 4 years since I last read this, so I just now remember what it is what he has that no other store has. Roy walked over and picked it up. It was a baby bird. Damn those little bastards. It was a scruffy, tiny, gray and brown thing, so young he could not tell what it was. probably a sparrow or a mockingbird or a wren of some kind. He had picked up many dead or hurt birds that those boys had shot, but this was the youngest by far. It probably had not even learned to fly. He knew he couldn't save it, but he took the little bird back inside the store anyway, wrapped it up in an old sock, and put it in a box in a warm, dark place in his office so some hawk or owl or other predator could not get it. At least he could save the baby bird from that and let the thing die in peace. Other than that, there was nothing more he could do for it. Most of the kids that lived around here were pretty nice, and Roy had a good relationship with all of them. But these two new boys were surly. Nobody knew who they were or where they had come from. Somebody said their family lived in an old run-down trailer in the way back up in the woods. He had never seen the parents, but he had seen the boys throwing rocks at a dog and had no use for them after that. Any less now. Anybody that would deliberately shoot a baby bird ought to have their heads knocked together. If he could get his hands on them, he would do it himself. The next morning, when he opened the store, he had almost forgotten about the baby bird when he heard something chirping away in the sock. He walked over and touched it, and it popped up with its mouth open wide, still very much alive and hungry for breakfast. Surprised, Roy said, "Well, I'll be damned, you little son of a gun." Now, he didn't know what to do. This was his first hurt bird he had ever picked up that had survived the night. But this little thing was definitely alive and carrying on like something crazy. He went to the phone and called his veterinarian friend who lived in Lillian, a small town about 10 miles away. "Hey, Bob, I've got this baby bird over here, and I think it's been shot." His friend was not even surprised. "Those kids with the BB guns again?" "Yeah." "What kind of bird?" "I don't know." Roy looked over at the bird. "He's kind of ugly. Looks kind of like some kind of mud hen. He's gray and brown, I think. Could be some kind of sparrow or mockingbird. Oh, I don't know what the thing is, but it looks like he's hungry. Should I feed it?" "Sure, if you want to." "Well, what should I give it?" "Give it the same thing its mother would. Worms, bugs, a little raw meat." He laughed. "After all, Roy, you're its mother now." "Oh, great, that's just what I need." "And Roy?" "What?" "Seriously, it probably won't live, but you might want to check and see if you can get those BBs out. If you don't, it will die for sure." Roy went over, picked up the bird and examined it, and was surprised at how strong it was, and as it squawked and struggled to get free. He held out the wings and could see 4 BBs lodged right under its right wing close to the breast. He got a pair of tweezers. After having to dig around for a moment, he carefully lifted the BBs out, one by one, as the bird squawked and squirmed in discomfort. "Sorry, fella, I know that hurts, but I've got to do it, pal." He cleaned the spot with alcohol and put him back in the sock. Then he went over to the live bait section of the store, pulled out a large English red worm and a few grubs, and took a razor blade and chopped it up to a nice breakfast for the bird, which proceeded to gobble the entire thing down and scream for more. Roy continued to keep the bird in his office. He did not want anyone to know what he was hand-feeding a baby bird 3 times a day and twice at night. He did not want the ribbing he would get from his friends. After all, he was a strapping 6'2" man taking care of a baby bird. Taking care of a baby bird might have seemed sissy-like to them. As the days went by, Roy tried not to become too attached. He knew how fragile they were and how hard it was to keep them alive. Every morning, he half expected to find it dead, but each morning when he opened the door and heard the bird chirping away, he was secretly pleased as punch and proud of the little bird for hanging on. He never saw anything want to live so bad in all his life, but he didn't tell anyone. He planned to keep feeding it, and if it survived, he would release it when it got old enough to fly. Several weeks went by. The bird grew stronger and stronger, and pretty soon was hopping all around the room, trying to flap its wings, but he could not seem to get off the ground. Roy noticed that each time he tried, he kept falling over to the right. As this continued to happen, Roy began to worry about him. One day, he put him in a shoebox and drove him over to his friend Bob's office. The vet looked at the bird and said, "The wing is just too badly damaged, Roy. He's never going to be able to fly. To fly like he should, and he'll certainly never survive in the wild. We should probably just go ahead and put him to sleep." Roy felt as someone had kicked him in the stomach. "Do you think so?" he asked, trying to hide his disappointment. "Yes, I do. You shouldn't keep a wild bird like this inside. It would be cruel, really." "Yeah, I guess you're right. I was just hoping he would make it." I can do it for you right now if you want me to." "No, it's my bird. I'll do it." "All right, that's up to you. I'll give you a bottle of chloroform. Just put some cotton on it and hold it over its beak. He won't feel anything. He'll just go to sleep." Roy put the bird back in the shoebox and drove home. And every time he heard the bird jumping around in the box, trying to get out, he knew his friend was right. It would be cruel to just keep a thing meant to be free closed up inside. That night he gave the bird as much food as he would eat, and around 9 o'clock he sat down and took out the chloroform and a ball of cotton. He just sat there staring at the bird, hopping around the room, jumping on everything in sight, and pecking at the papers on his desk. He picked him up and examined him more closely under the light. It was then he noticed some of his feathers were just beginning to turn from brown to red. Upon closer inspection, he began to see the beginnings of a small crest forming on the back of his head, and a black mass starting to form around his eyes. Then it hit him. This was a redbird. What a shame this little guy was not going to get a chance to grow up and become the beautiful bird he was meant to be. Damn, all of a sudden Roy felt like going back into the woods and finding those two boys and cracking their heads together right then and there. Finally, after sitting and staring at the bird for a few more hours, Roy stood up and threw the bottle in the trash can. "Oh, the hell with it, buddy. See you in the morning." He turned the lights out and went home to bed. He could no more have put that bird to sleep than fly to the moon. After that night, Roy started keeping the bird in the front of the store with him. Eventually, word got around that a baby redbird was living at the grocery store, and everybody can't get the page. And everybody came in and got a big kick out of it. At first, the bird sat on the counter beside Roy and hopped all over the cash register. But as the weeks went by, and he was able to fly in short spurts, many times missing his mark, but he was getting stronger and more active by the day, so much so that just in case, Roy had put a sign on the front door, "Don't let the bird out." At night, when Roy locked up and went home and left the bird in the store so he could have the whole place to himself to roam freely as he pleased, and roam he did. One morning, Roy came in and found he had pecked his way through the top of a Cracker Jack box and was hopping around with a large Cracker Jack stuck on his beak. Roy removed it and laughed. The crazy bird must like Cracker Jacks. From then on, he called the bird Jack. But as Roy found out later, Jack also liked Ritz crackers, potato chips, peanut butter, and vanilla wafers, and especially liked chocolate-covered Buddy Bars. I don't know what Buddy Bars are. Sorry, my nose is dripping. Ugh. Okay. The little bird's appetite for sweets was relentless and not exclusive. He once pecked his way inside a large bag of marshmallows, and by the time Roy found him the next morning, he was completely covered with white powdered sugar. Eventually, everybody got used to buying things that had just been pecked at by Jack first. Everyone who went to the store got a big kick out of Jack except for one person. Francis's young sister, Mildred, made it clear that she did not like the bird and constantly complained to Francis. "I just know he walks over everything," she said. There's a little There's little peck holes in everything I pick up. He's just a pest. The last time I was up there, he landed in my hair and messed up my hairdo, and I had to go home and redo the whole thing. Francis, who liked the bird, said, "Oh, Mildred, he never does that to me. I think he just does it to aggravate you because he knows you don't like him." Ugh! Stupid nose. Ugh. Sorry, but my nose is gonna bug the absolute mess out of me if I don't. Sorry. Ugh. Alright. Okay. Yeah, he just aggravates you because he knows you don't like him. Well, I don't care what you say. I don't think a place where you sell food is a sanitary place to have a bird. And I told Roy, I said, it's a good thing we don't have health inspectors around here, or that bird would be against the law. Then why do you keep going up there if all you were ever going to do is fuss about that bird day and night? Where else am I going to shop? It's not like we are living in the middle of 25 supermarkets. I don't have a choice. I'm stuck. I'm telling you, that bird is a nuisance. You can't go up there without having it jump on you. He's a menace to society, and that's all there is to it, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Francis said, "Well, I don't either. Just make a list of what you want, and I'll go get your groceries." Well, I don't either. Just make out a list of what you want, and I'll go get your groceries for you, so I don't have to listen to you complain. Mildred looked at her, highly incensed. And just how am I supposed to know what I want until I get there? That's why it's called shopping, Francis. And with that, she marched out the door. Although Jack was a real handful, and, without a doubt, he could be a pest at times, he had grown from the tiny ugly mud he had started out as in life into a beautiful scarlet red and black masked bird. With his lipstick-colored beak and shiny little reddish-brown eyes, he looked exactly like a red bird should. But for some reason, when Jack looked right at you, he seemed to have a silly smile on his face. One day, Roy told Claude Underwood, "I swear that crazy bird has a sense of humor. Every morning I come in and he's done something else just to make me laugh. I came in yesterday and the fool was hanging upside down, swinging back and forth in the fishnet." As time went on, Roy saw how smart the bird was and began to teach him tricks. Pretty soon, he had Jack riding around on his finger and eating sunflower seeds out of his hand. His favorite game was when Roy would hide a sunflower seed in someone's pocket, and Jack would go inside the pocket of the surprised person and come back out with it and fly and hand it over to Roy. Then Roy would give him 10 more. Jack clearly loved the attention he was getting. When he saw himself in the mirror for the first time, he hunched down and bobbed his head at his reflection and tried to attack it. So Roy had to get rid of all the mirrors. Jack had made it known that as far as he was concerned, the store was his territory, and he did not want another bird around. When the bird in the mirror had disappeared so quickly, Jack was convinced that he and he alone had run the intruder off, so he puffed up and strutted around and became bolder and bolder. Most of the time, he rode on Roy's shoulder or on his hat, but he pretty much went where he pleased. Eventually, that turned to be dangerous. One day, the postmistress, Dottie Nivens, a big fat orange cat named Henry, sat outside the store all day, looking in the window at Jack fluttering around the cash register, just waiting with his tail swishing back and forth, his eyes never losing sight of the bird. He was determined to catch it one way or another. Around 3:30, the kids from the Lost River got off the school bus from Lillian and started coming in for candy and cold drinks, the cat saw his chance. He lunged through the open screen door before anyone saw him and leaped up on the counter and made a grab for Jack. Jack shot straight up into the air, just barely managing to escape Henry's claws, and landed on the top shelf, not to be deterred. Henry went tearing through the store right behind him, knocking racks of potato chips, cigarette cartons, cans, and bottles on the floor as he chased Jack all around the room. And then everybody was running through the store, chasing the cat and yelling. What a racket! It sounded like an earthquake. Poor Jack had his feathers flying and his crest standing straight up on his head, was hopping and leaping as fast and high as he could, with the cat continuing to miss him by mere inches. Jack somehow flapped and hopped his way all the way to the back of the store and landed on top of the meat counter, and the cat immediately sprang up from after him and slid on all 4 feet all the way down the other end, knocking off bottles of ketchup, barbecue sauce, and horseradish in his wake. In the meantime, Jack, in one Herculean effort, took a tremendous leap from the counter and flapped his wings long enough to land on the deer head, just out of the cat's reach. Roy was finally able to shoo the frustrated Henry out the back door with a broom, while Jack, with his feathers still all fluffed up, sat on his safe perch and fussed at the cat as he slunk out of the store. Jack did not come down for the rest of the day and continued to fuss at Roy for letting the cat inside in the first place. The next day, a new sign was added to the screen door. Don't let the bird out, don't let the cat in.